Yes, I can. But it's on the move, and there are a lot of initiatives going on, and I think it's a really exciting time. There's a move towards what we call P12 engineering, which is about bringing design thinking, and I go to things like the Museum of Science Boston, engineering as elementary process. We have a very simple design process, and I take the idea about not trying to break design down to some simplistic series of steps, but it gets kids thinking around a process and articulating that. So I think there's a lot of really exciting things going on in engineering education, which are flowing, I believe, back into the K-12 space. So I think it's and Purdue is, and I don't say mean Purdue, Indiana's got this key place here that I'm sure not many people know about it. It's something we should be really proud of. It's a long tradition. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. As you were talking about the fact that the way we define what science and engineering actually is changing so rapidly. I think you really see that if you look in the last 2 weeks. In the last week, we've seen the MacArthur Genius Awards come out, and we've seen the first round of Nobel Prizes. I don't think we've heard them all yet, but the diversity in the types of science that you see across that group is unbelievably diverse. There's a 35-year-old Nobel Prize winner in physics, and one of the MacArthur geniuses was 74 for work he's done recently. I mean, it was just this incredible depth, and they were all doing things that would have been unthinkable 5 or 6 years ago. And I think we're really seeing this change. And so, as a way of transition, Dewayne, in this, we're seeing all this rapid change. Schools are not famous for their ability to adapt quickly to anything. By quickly, I mean over 30 or 40 years. And I say that generally as a public school fan, but I mean, from your very unique position at one of the country's just foremost education-focused foundations, I mean, what are some of the problems? What are some of those barriers that we can start to chip away at?
Well, thanks. Again, thanks also for the chance to be here. I think one of the ways to answer that question is the way we've been looking at this is to realize that this shift that people are describing is not a shift that's just happening at an upper echelon, at a kind of a thin strata of innovation and creative people, the creative class that kind of keeps things going. But you can see the same phenomenon happening throughout the entire society. And we see this very clearly in the data we've been looking at on what's happening to jobs, the U.S. workforce, globalization as it affects employment. You see the same phenomenon happening throughout, which is why we've called for dramatically increased levels of higher education attainment in the United States, a much larger proportion of Americans and Indianans going to college and completing college. Our specific goal is to reach a 60% higher education attainment rate, which is in fact the rate where South Korea is basically at right now among young adults. So when you unpack and say what is really happening, you find that it is in fact a shift that is happening throughout the economy, throughout the society, and it's, in a nutshell, it's the emergence of a knowledge-based economy and a knowledge society. Now, when you then get to your question, so what do you do about it? How do you really address this question? I think part of the answer is that we recognize that the answer is within us, in a sense. It's within the nature of work, it's in the nature of the society. We have to incorporate learning into school. Now that may sound like an odd sort of statement to make, but the fact is people now increasingly go to school, then they go to work and they learn on the job what they need to know. And that's just kind of an odd way to think about how we go about doing these things. I had a chance to, last week I heard Mayor Bloomberg talk about education in New York, and it was very interesting, some of the things he said. And one of the things he said was that they have learned that nobody has the aspiration anymore to get a high school diploma. What they want is they want a college education. They know that they need access to a higher level of education to be able to move forward. I think we can use that to our advantage, if you will. I think we want to challenge people, challenge young people in particular, with that idea that what they're really about is to gain access to these exciting careers, these exciting opportunities, to be creative, to do something with their life of value, and to really give them a chance to do that by modeling it, by showing it to them, by giving them that chance. We unpacked some of the data. We found, for example, that problem solving is an essential skill in today's workforce. Well, I somewhat cynically said, well, if we decide that American college graduates need to know problem solving, we would probably require it of all college students and create 1,000-seat lecture sections, a course on problem solving, so that everybody would get the principles of problem solving through history and learn, how to go, the steps that you could test in a multiple choice exam to ensure that they know how to solve problems. The real question, of course, is how do you integrate problem solving into the curriculum? How do you make sure that people actually have an opportunity to do the things and thereby learn them? That's the real challenge. And frankly, I don't think that is a challenge so much on students, because I think the students are ready for that, whether they're grade school students, high school students, or college students. I think they're ready for that, they're hungry for that. The challenge, frankly, is on the design of our education system, to create those opportunities, to reform the way in which we teach, the way in which we deliver education, to actually reflect the way people actually do this today.
Greg, do you have a reaction to that? I mean, what are you doing within the School of Science in terms of how you're changing actual student learning?
I think it's largely we're doing is just open-ended problems, and we have to move in that direction. Finally, it takes a little bit more effort in order to practice this, because it takes more time, but it also takes more patience from the faculty members and a little more creativity from their part. But I think that's the number one thing that we really have to work on, is the open-ended problems. That there's not not everything. Students sometimes get the idea that they can open the back of the book and everything has an answer, to the odd number questions. But in fact, it doesn't. There's more than one right answer out there. There's also a lot of wrong ones, and I think they need to understand that through these kind of open-ended problems.
Lenore, what do you? You've also worked, and we were talking about this over lunch, with students primarily in 4th to 12th grades too. What do you think some of the issues are with the way that we're teaching, or just teaching in general, and the way students are learning at that level, since you have this kind of unique comparison you can make working at all the levels?
Yeah, I think the challenge for it comes back to inquiry-based education and problem solving, and that is typically not what they're getting for the most part. There are a few pilot programs ongoing now to try to get inquiry-based education out there, and we kind of haven't really touched on the question of teacher preparedness, and I think that's a huge issue. And we could debate for quite a long time whether they need to be more content, more content training for teachers, or whether it's more getting at pedagogy and how the process of teaching they do, which is what we were just discussing. But I think it comes down to that inquiry-based approach, the open-ended questions, and that goes right back to the discovery and the observation skills and problem solving, and it needs to be occurring in everything they do, not just in science and math. It's across language arts and even in all the arts. And I think that's the key places we're seeing that. And the challenge we have is that there's a strong tendency to teach the way we were taught or to do the things we already know. So that we really need to be getting to professional development for educators to teach them how to do inquiry-based education. And frankly, we got to this whole testing till we die, leave no child left untested. That's killing us because that type of testing does not allow for inquiry-based and open-ended problem solving because you can't grade them. So we're right down to the multiple choice questions, and the teachers are teaching to the tests over and over and over again because the metric is so heavily based on that. So I chuckle at your China example, but that's exactly right. The skill sets we want to instill in